At 80, Michael Gambon no longer speaks to impress. He speaks because silence has become heavier than applause. For decades, he stood beneath theater lights, immense and unshakable. On stage, his presence could still a room. On screen, his gaze carried authority, mystery, and restraint. Yet behind that towering figure lived another man. A man who learned early that trust breaks quietly and betrayal rarely announces itself. Time did not erase those moments, it sharpened them. Now in the stillness of age, Gambon counts not awards but absences. Voices that fell silent, hands that withdrew. At 80, he murmurs a sentence colder than any role. There are 5 people I will never forgive. Not spoken in anger, spoken with certainty. 5 faces rise from memory, each a scar the world never saw. And even now their shadows remain, waiting to be named. They belong to a story told without noise, where pain survived success and memory outlasted fame. This is not confession, but reckoning. A quiet descent into truths long buried, asking one question: who shaped the wounds he still carries, and why have they never faded with time? Because some scars deepen, precisely when the world stops watching, closely. Long before the stage knew his name, Michael Gambon was a boy learning how to listen. Born in Dublin in 1940, raised later in London, he grew up between accents, expectations, and quiet rooms where feelings were not discussed but endured. His father worked long hours, his mother held the household together with discipline rather than tenderness. Affection was present, yet measured. As a child, Gambon discovered that attention was earned through stillness. He watched adults closely, memorizing pauses, tones, the weight of unsaid things. In school, he was not loud or brilliant, he was observant. He learned to disappear, and in disappearing, to survive. There was an early wound he rarely named, the sense of being replaceable. Moving cities, changing environments, he learned that belonging could be temporary. Friendships faded without explanation. Promises were made casually and forgotten just as easily. Trust, to him, became something provisional. Theater entered his life almost by accident, yet it felt familiar. On stage, silence had power. Restraint mattered. He could transform uncertainty into presence, distance into authority. Acting did not heal the wound, it taught him how to mask it. From those early years, a quiet rule took shape inside him. Loyalty mattered, words mattered. And when either was broken, he never forgot. He simply remembered, patiently. This inner discipline would later define how he loved, trusted, and endured betrayals in silence. Success did not arrive for Michael Gambon with noise. It unfolded gradually, almost cautiously, as if testing whether he truly belonged under the lights. In the late 1960s and 1970s, theater became his true home. Under the guidance of demanding directors and unforgiving stages, he forged a reputation not through charm, but through control. Each gesture was measured, each silence intentional. Audiences sensed it immediately. There was weight in his presence. When he stepped onto a stage, time seemed to slow. Critics struggled to describe it, often calling him intimidating, commanding, or dangerous. Not because he shouted, but because he never needed to. His rise was built on discipline, not popularity. As the years passed, recognition followed. Leading roles multiplied. Awards arrived. The theater world spoke his name with reverence. Yet with acclaim came exposure. Trust became currency. Collaboration became dependence. And slowly, cracks began to form beneath the surface of success. Film and television expanded his reach, bringing him into public view. Fame introduced new expectations. Managers, producers, networks, promises spoken in meetings and rewritten behind closed doors. He learned that success attracted admiration, but also calculation. Smiles grew strategic. Loyalty became negotiable. Gambon adapted as he always had. He performed. He delivered. He remained professional. To the world, he appeared unshaken, a pillar of reliability. Internally, he began to register moments that unsettled him. A role promised, then quietly reassigned. A collaborator praised publicly, absent privately. Conversations that ended without explanation. The greatest irony of his ascent was solitude. The higher he climbed, the fewer voices spoke honestly around him. Applause filled theaters, Yet silence filled corridors. He learned to walk away alone after standing ovations, carrying both triumph and unease. This was the moment when admiration and betrayal began to coexist. Success illuminated everything, including those who would later wound him most deeply, not through malice, but through absence, through choosing convenience over loyalty and ambition over truth. The first rupture did not come with confrontation. It came with silence. A role discussed, then postponed. A collaboration once warm, now distant. Calls unanswered. Explanations delayed until they were no longer necessary. Gambon understood then that betrayal rarely arrives as an event. It arrives as neglect. He had given loyalty without calculation, believing that shared work created shared respect. But the industry moved differently. Decisions were made elsewhere. Behind doors he was no longer invited to open. What unsettled him was not the loss itself, but the ease with which he was replaced. Without warning, without honesty. That moment marked a shift. He began to withdraw emotionally, maintaining professionalism while guarding trust. Each fracture added weight to his silences. He stopped asking questions that would never be answered. Publicly, nothing changed. Performances remained precise. Praise continued. Privately, he learned to catalog disappointments, storing them quietly without drama. He did not retaliate. He remembered. From that point on, certain names stayed with him. Faces associated with broken promises and unspoken endings. These were not enemies, but absences. People who chose distance instead of truth. And over time, those absences multiplied. 5 of them in particular carved marks deep enough to endure. 5 faces he carries still, not in anger, but in memory. Waiting, unchanged, in the quiet space he never filled again. 5 names, 5 scars. 5 moments when trust broke quietly yet permanently. The first was someone he once loved as a brother, a fellow actor, a confidant during long rehearsals and late nights. They shared doubts, ambition, and the belief that loyalty mattered more than opportunity. But when a defining role appeared, loyalty bent. Promises made in private dissolved in public silence. Gambon never confronted him. He simply understood. What hurt was not the loss of the role, but the realization that ambition had spoken louder than friendship. The second was a powerful figure behind the scenes, a producer who praised him openly while undermining him discreetly. Meetings were cordial, words flattering, but decisions told another story. Contracts shifted, commitments vanished. Gambon felt used, not discarded. He learned that respect in some rooms was performative. This wound surprised him because it taught him how easily admiration could be manufactured. The third scar cut closer. Family does not betray loudly. It disappoints quietly. A relative he trusted failed him at a moment when he needed support rather than judgment. Silence replaced conversation. Distance replaced care. Gambon never spoke of it publicly, yet this absence followed him longest. Blood, he learned, did not guarantee loyalty, and that knowledge stayed with him, heavy and unresolved. The fourth was not a person, but an entity, the public gaze. The industry that celebrated him also reduced him. Headlines simplified a complex man into a persona. Expectations hardened. Mistakes were magnified. Privacy dissolved. He accepted fame, but never forgave the way it erased nuance. Being misunderstood on such a scale left a scar no applause could heal. And then there is the fifth, the most difficult to name, the most honest. The fifth person he never truly forgave was himself, for staying silent when he should have spoken, for accepting compromises he later regretted, for trusting too easily, then punishing himself for it, for believing professionalism could replace truth. He remembers the moments he walked away without defending his worth, the conversations he rehearsed too late, the boundaries he failed to draw. With age came clarity, and with clarity, remorse. This final scar was not inflicted by others, but carried alone. And yet in naming himself last, something shifted. Because recognition is not condemnation, it is awareness. Gambon does not list these 5 to accuse. He lists them to understand. Some wounds cannot be erased, but they can be acknowledged. And perhaps in that quiet acknowledgement, forgiveness begins. not for the others, but for the man who carried them all. At 80, Michael Gambon sits with memory as one sits with an old companion. Without fear, without urgency, the noise has faded. What remains are images, a dim stage after the lights go out, a quiet room, a voice echoing in absence. He does not speak of forgiveness as victory. He speaks of it as distance. Time has not erased the scars on his soul, but it has softened their edges. They no longer demand answers. They simply exist, reminders of moments when trust mattered. In this final stillness, Gambon understands that some wounds were necessary. They shaped restraint, depth, and the silences that defined his art. Pain did not diminish him, it refined him. Perhaps forgiveness is not about release, but about recognition, about allowing memory to remain without ruling the present. The five faces still linger, but they no longer dominate the room. What dominates now is calm. And so the questions remain, unanswered, suspended in quiet. Can a life be fully lived without forgiving? Or is forgiveness sometimes the courage to live alongside pain without letting it speak anymore? The stage is dark, the silence complete.